we have with us leaders from Minneapolis and Hartford and Houston. But I told Pam and Paul that I'm just going to ask questions of them first, and then if I can think of anything, then just jump in there. So Pam,
Thank you.
so this is a big part of our work, right? Or at least I think that's the reason why the three of us are here. So I guess question for both you and Paul: how do you earn a reputation as a convener? So how do you, in a community of like multiple players, work to arrive at a place where when people need to be brought into the room, they call a Chief Minneapolis or a Chief Hartford?
That's not a question I anticipated. I think I would answer that in a couple ways. One is I personally have been in my community for almost 40 years. And I've worked at every level of the education system and across many nonprofits and in the electoral arena and in the community organizing arena. So part of it is, though, we live in a fairly big town, it's a small town. And so I think one is I personally have gained some cred for having paid my dues in my own community, and I know a lot of people. I think the other thing is that we have worked very, very hard, and this is, I know we're situated somewhat differently than a lot of people, of being very independent and very aligned with our school district. So we've worked very, very hard to be as close as possible to our superintendent. I think we have a good superintendent. And so I think that has given us access to information and data that other groups don't have, so they see us in a broker role, and that helps us out.
So does that hurt you with some groups, though, in terms of your proximity to the district?
Yes, and you know.
How do you overcome that when you want to get them in the room?
You know, I think this is it's just a choice we have made that for us to be effective at our work, the proximity to the district is more useful than not. While I think other people could make other choices depending on their community or whatever. But for us, you know, some LEFs choose to be, you know, the trusted community voice. Some LEFs, or more probably other forms, choose to be the trusted kind of district ally. We try to play really in the space which I call respectful tension, which is that we're negotiating it all the time. We have to be there because we have to have the alliance on either side. And I think because we do exist in that space of respectful tension, we can bring more people to the table than that.
So, Paul, I'm going to get to you in a minute, but does Minneapolis Public Schools, do they pay into Chief Minneapolis?
We have a very complex relationship with Minneapolis Public Schools financially because we came out of 11 years ago as being the Minneapolis Public Schools Foundation. So we are more financially intertwined. We have, as people know, or may know, we have career and college centers in all the high schools. They were privately funded at $1 million a year for 5 years. And when that became impossible to sustain, Minneapolis Public Schools actually pays half the cost of those. So we do have a financial relationship.
Yeah. So now you probably haven't been in Hartford.
Not that long.
And
no, 4 years. Yeah, right. 4 years.
And so how do you do it? Get on the phone and
we don't convene nearly as much as others in the room. I mean, I think we focus much more on just kind of communications and different communication strategies. But when we do convene, it is because of our position, where we like to say that there's no dog in the fight when we're out there. Although I think our branding is going to change because we're starting to realize that no one likes people who are sitting on a fence, right? That's not that's not the reputation we want, but it is because of our neutrality and our refusal to be kind of co-opted by the district as their communications arm, which they would love us to be. That allows people to really listen when we speak. And so, we've done kind of 3 convenings, and I would say I've learned, 3 different lessons from those. I always thought it was specifically because of our value proposition in the community that we were supposed to be the independent watchdog, and so that's what people respected. One of the convenings I found out that people came because we're funded by the business community. And they said, shit, these folks are a lot of our funders, so we better show up. And now I'm starting thinking, wow, like that's a lever that we've never really pulled. Like, we may want to. But also, we've earned our street cred really by hiring parents. So I have, 1.5 full-time staff members who do, the vast majority of our engaging work. So if I've got to convene folks who are working with parents, it's parents themselves who are doing that convening. And that goes so far with parents, but also with organizations that work for parents that see that as like holy shit, like you're taking that much of a risk, having this parent represented organization. It's like, yeah, yes we are. And it has earned us a tremendous amount of respect that more than we even anticipated, to be honest.
So now, do you work just with Hartford, or do you work with multiple districts?
All we care about is Hartford. one of 168 districts in our state. So we are in a state, it's not a county system, there's 168 districts, and they're all tiny.
But you just work Hartford.
That's it.
Well, so for us, like, when we opened 15 years ago, we could pretty much convene anybody in Houston that we wanted to, because we had $40 million in the bank, right? Now we've got $8 million, right? And we can still convene.
Woe are you.
Say what?
Woe are you.
Yeah, so, yeah, we're crying. We're crying about that, right? But, we can still convene, but we convene because of different reasons, right? So when people walk in the room, it's no longer like they want money from us, because they pretty much know they're not going to get money, right? I can't think of a time where we want to convene a group. Now, sometimes we convene and we fail. Like, we just had a failure. I was telling a smaller group, we have data confusion in Houston. We have about 8 groups that are running data reports. So in aggregate, there's about 55 or 60 different data points that everybody wants Houston to pay attention to, right? And it's craziness. So we convened all of those players and basically said, let's figure out what is the most important summative number, and then let's figure out the research practices that lead us to that, to improving that summative number, right? And so we walked away from the table thinking that, like, the Center for Houston's Future and Children at Risk, we're going to, like, kind of drop some of their stuff, and they haven't dropped it, because funding is connected to that data. Somebody is paying them to collect and publish that data, right? So convenings sometimes, like for us, are there ever like convenings that you won't do? Have people come to you and said, hey, we think we really need to get these people in the room, and you just say, no, we're not going to do that?
Yeah, we just decided that about a month ago, actually. So people had been lobbying for us to step into a very kind of community political issue, which is all of these different parent training organizations who are just kind of picking off parents and trying to claim ownership over kind of parent advocacy in Hartford. Some of these organizations are run by parents. And we met with a bunch of them to try to really respond to what was a kind of a very obvious community need. And it was, it was pretty venomous. I mean, it was pretty much like, as bad as I've seen city politics, but at the community level, just people being like, I once worked with that person, and she did X, Y, and Z to me, and I won't even be in a room with her. We said, you know what? want to stake the reputation on Achieve Hartford, on whether or not we're going to accomplish getting these folks to play nice in the sandbox together, like, I must be an idiot. You know, so we then told folks that we're not going to do that, and we told them the reason why. And that's just one recent example.
Pam?
No.
No? You pretty much, you're willing to give everything a shot?
No, I can't think of an example where we would want to do that. And in fact, with your permission, Scott, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the way we convene, because I think it's quite a bit different than some of what I've heard today, and it might just give people some other things to think about. So, just let me set the context for this. So we're a community of about 385,000 people. We have, it's a majority white community. It's about 60% white, about 40% people of color. It is still a very socioeconomically diverse community. You know, the middle class has stayed in the city. But our schools are 65% poverty, 70% kids of color. So the face of the city and the face of the schools are completely opposite of each other. And so when I think about convening, I think about how do we convene this community to care about the kids when the kids, where the majority older community does not look like the kids who are coming up through the public schools. And so I think about convening that way, and similar to other people, we have only 20% of the kids who live in Minneapolis, 20% of the people who live in Minneapolis have children in the schools. So we've got 80% of the taxpayers voting for our schools with only 20% of them kids in the schools. So I see that as another convening opportunity where we have to figure out what is the stake of the 80% in the lives of the 20% that are actually the future of our city, but you know, it's very indirect. So so what we try to think about in terms of convening is how do we provide the older generation of our city a stake in its next generation. So we convene a lot of conversations around that, whether or not it's in the business community, and it's probably a lot like in the business community or you know, one place we're doing a lot of convening right now that's very exciting to me is we're convening young alums of the Minneapolis Public Schools, alums who are in their 20s, who are more racially and linguistically and generationally like the kids that are in the schools. And we're saying, you need to come back in right away. Not when you're 40, not when you're 50 or 60, to give your old high school money. Come back in right away and build a relationship with the kids in the schools. So we're doing a lot of convening of alums. And then the other thing I just want to throw on the table, I've got a number of other examples, is we're really, really concerned about this issue of career readiness and soft skills that everybody was talking about. So we convened a collaborative that we call the Career Readiness Collaborative about 1.5 years ago, and this is all the organizations that work in career readiness, not college access, because college access we had down, but career readiness, nobody was convening those groups. And so we identified, we have about 20, you know, kind of strong participants, but over 120 programs in our community that had something to do with career readiness. We created a database out of them, but the most important thing we did is we said we have to have a common measurement of soft skills that our community is using. And so, long story short, we actually ended up hooking up with Chicago Public Schools that had the 21st Century Skills Project. I don't know if any of you have heard about it. It's now got a funky name called MHA Labs, Measurements of Human Achievement. But they have what we think is the best rubric for assessing kids for 21st century skills or soft skills. And the reason that this is important is because we need to align. So this is the point of convening, is to not just identify the problem, but align people on the solution. And so, you know, we're trying to work off of the same playbook, if you will, about these skills, and then move that so that all of us are not just talking about teamwork, but we're developing a common rubric to look at teamwork. So we see convening, I mean, we've heard a lot today about convening the community around broad issues, or specifically convening parents, but we have tried to convene partners to really operate very effectively and efficiently with one another on behalf of kids.
Well, there's different types of convenience,
Right.
right? So that like speaks to us in that, so we do public affairs convenings, we do, program convenings, right? So right now, we're working on a convening where, yeah, believe it or not, in Houston, we've got this unbelievable talent around literacy and numeracy, but very few of them come into contact with the school districts because the school districts have already hired their own people. So they don't ever reach out to the community for the talent, right? So you have like this really, really rich community of practice sitting right here in our backyard. Nobody utilizes it because the ISD has created sort of their own structures, and that's the structure that they trust. But yeah, so we do like tonight we've got like convening, we've got a board dinner, and tomorrow we run a speaker series. And what we try to do with the speaker series, I was telling Dan earlier, is we'll set it up at the beginning of the year and we'll say, okay, what kind of messaging do we want to send out to Houston? What do we want people to be talking about? What's kind of in the news? So like tonight, we've got Tony Jackson and Gail Andrews, who wrote Turning Points 20 years ago. And so the conversation is, so what does, year 21 to 30 look like for middle school kids, in this country, right? But we do that for a purpose because we have funders, we have school board members, we have state legislators, because when we go to Austin, we want to make sure that we build these convenings into sort of our strategic intent around sort of connecting practice with policy.
I think the tension that we've always faced around convening is this idea of, our school district not having capacity in certain areas and us stepping in to fill that void and really kind of doing what they should be doing in many ways, which is if they're going to own the school choice process, which is theirs in Hartford, community partners need to be involved. They just need to be, or else parents will get left behind. So we have, for 3 years, convened community partners that touch parents, especially with a focus on pre-K, and really created ways to get choice education to happen, right? Something that partners have been very proud of. It's been a great way to kind of empower the community to kind of take ownership over education. But kind of the district hasn't kind of gotten the message, right? So we've been very direct with them too, saying, we're not doing this forever. And so, I'm just hitting I'm thinking about your superintendent, just how much he's wearing his values on his sleeve when he talks about engaging the community. And that's not the situation in Hartford. And so what we're doing now is shifting somewhat away from doing kind of convening on an issue to really campaigning hard around an issue to make sure that partners know that this shared responsibility is something they're agreeing to take on without us in the future. So it's a way of kind of, and we don't see it as like a threat, like, hey, we're leaving. It's more like we are shifting our focus to really build self-sufficiency in the community so that we can choose other issues. Because as a 5.5-person staff committed to school choice, my major campaign that runs 6 months a year is on school choice. I can't run multiple campaigns at the same time, and that's half my year, right? So this is a tension for us that we're trying to manage, and we've done a better job with the school district on college readiness, where we're copying March Hiller's College Access Roundtable, and kind of within a year, kind of pass that on to the school district, and now participate on something that they are convening monthly, that we are no longer convening. But I just think it's an interesting role to play, and it's one where we're trying to explore how much more do we want to do of that, and how much less. And I literally have a new budget that is going to broken down by convening dollars and campaign dollars in ways that we've never thought about before. Yeah. And communications for us remains our biggest piece, which is also a topic for this conversation, and that's been our flagship program. Is our we have a civil rights journalist who writes an e-newsletter every week that is read by kind of the top 3,000 leaders in the city, and the minute it hits people's phones, like for some reason the mayor is like always first or second to read it. It's really kind of cool. And the minute it hits phones, people are reading about what's happening in the school district. And that for us has been, the primary vehicle for us to just kind of communicate what is happening in our school district in the reform. And then this past year, when I took over as executive director, we instituted a similar piece, but into the community. That started out very quickly as kind of a parent newsletter, and then we realized, again, like trying to kind of build some self-sufficiency. How do we get the neighborhood newspapers, there are many, to kind of create ongoing columns that we can just feed? So there are 3 newspapers every week that are putting out something that my communications associate, who's also a parent of kids in the school district, who's writing. And that has opened up a world to us of reach, extending our reach into the community. Where we get emails from folks because they read something in, the North End agent that is just like, and we're almost like, holy shit, we should figure out what we're going to do with these. It's like all these folks who want to engage with us now, we're like kind of catching up to the demand for information, which is wonderful.
So you alluded to something earlier that I wanted to ask a question about to both of you. So how much social networking are you using currently to convene?
We do a ton of social media. We probably tweet 2 to 3 times a day. We're on Facebook every day. We're on LinkedIn. We videotape everything. We take pictures of everything. I feel like one of the things we do best is tell a story about youth again, because most of the people who live in our city actually don't know the youth of our city. And these youth are the future of our city. And so I think a lot of it is telling the story of youth, what they're doing, what they need, what their aspirations are. So we do a lot of that kind of social media, and we are now linked to, we're bounced around all the time. But, we truly see the power of social media, because a point of view that we put out on a tweet bounces around all day long, with other organizations picking it up, or the mayor picking it up, or something, we're retweeted a lot. My communications person is kind of a genius, and she does a lot of things, but and for a while our website was in a tremendous crisis, and as we were reforming it, we basically, got very aggressive with social media, and it's the best thing that happened to us, because in fact, the world is in social media now, not websites in general.
Yeah, and we're actually just embarking on a much more sophisticated website and social media platform. We literally have, started using Facebook to do outreach to parents, a year ago, and it has been one of those things that exploded, where folks will be at Board of Education meetings, and we'll find out from someone else that those 5 parents that they found out about on Facebook. So we have to actually start tracking it. But video to us is the future. So we are investing heavily in being able to create very short snippets of video that capture key messages that we want our parents especially to get. So, we sit on a group that we help convene called the Hartford Campaign for Grade Level Reading, right? That I think probably many of you guys were trying to apply for that National League of Cities recognition around 3rd grade reading. And, we didn't get recognition there, but that group has now become a powerful group in the city. And none of them had done any video, and we just started cranking out kind of small videos for them to start using around, where we ask parents to kind of act in a video, really quickly. And the quality of the video is amazingly good. So, there's a grandmother talking to a parent, their daughter, about why isn't Michelle going to preschool today? And the parent's talking about how, the weather's really bad. And then, conversation ensues really quickly. And then there's a message that comes on after the video to parents. And that work is, we're prepared to invest a lot more in that, because that stuff goes viral very quickly.
Yeah, we launched a campaign using website and texting called "Is My Child Ready?" And so I was testifying in front of the Senate Ed Committee, and I was bitching and moaning to them that new test that was rolled out in Texas a bunch of parents didn't know anything about them because the Texas Education Agency had cut their budget by 50%. So they didn't have anybody to go out and kind of spread the word and whatever. So we were driving home that night, and like I told my public affairs director, I said, Melissa, we got to figure out something to do. So we launched this website that asked folks to text in 3 questions. And like some of our middle schools, when we launched it, like one of our middle schools had 156 phone calls the next day, wanted to talk about STAR, and like they called us and they were all pissed off. And like our answer back is, so this is your job, right? You're supposed to explain, and then just as an aside, we were talking about TAMSA with the Florida parents. TAMSA stands for Texans Advocating for Meaningful Student Achievement, which is a bunch of mothers in Texas. And I said that the original, and this is true, their original title, they wanted to be Parents Investigating Student Testing. But they didn't really like the acronym, right? So, but they called me up, and they were upset because they thought we were advocating for the test. I was like, we're not advocating for the test. What we're advocating for is that parents need to learn what the test is. And honestly, Susan, once most parents find out how whacked out the test is, they're going to come to your side. So Is My Child Ready is actually a pretty good campaign for you, right? But it's interesting, and I'd like y'all's opinion on this. And it is, so we try to play neutral. But have you ever had these experiences of groups trying to like pull you, into their agenda or onto their side? Pam?
Sure. We've made the mayor pissed, and he's our friend, because he thought we said something but didn't put it in a good light. We've certainly upset the communications department of Mpls, our Minneapolis Public Schools, because, they didn't like it. I don't think we have had that reaction from the community, but we've certainly had that reaction from people who have a stake in their reputation. And in what we perceive to be a very neutral thing.
Yeah, we piss people off all the time, but I think in a good way. So most recently, we launched a campaign to kind of engage parents in workshops, which we run. So a lot of our communication is actually very direct service from parents directly to parents in the form of workshops and other interventions and other interactions. So one of our flyers was all about kind of are you a kindergarten ready parent, right? And we screened this with 150 parents and talked about is this campaign going to fly? Is this messaging insulting? Everyone thought it was great. We had four flyers. The first one was aggressive on purpose, which talked about kind of take care of your child here or else they're going to end up here. Right? There's a picture of someone who comes, right? I mean, great. We got kind of pushed through the websites and other folks promoted it. Wonderful. Parent advocacy organizations were rip shit, saying, this is insulting to parents. This is a negative message. Why can't it be positive, right? And what we found through that work was that it was more of a threat. I guess we interpreted this. It was more of a threat to kind of their position with parents, in the sense that, are you going to come and co-opt their message? And it was a great thing for us, because when we had meetings to talk about kind of all the parents who actually said this was a great message that no one's talking about, that no one's kind of gut punching anybody, right? But we usually don't anger the community like that, but the district constantly. And we have to do a much better job of kind of, I think, working again with our district to build their capacity and not just fill gaps in what they do. So when we communicate on school choice data, that makes them look bad. Like two weeks ago in a 3-month campaign, and only 32% of 8th grade families have filled out the mandatory school choice application. That makes them look very bad, right? Then there's emergency meetings, and then our relationship then has to get kind of over time healed. But then all of our funders say, well, shit, if you guys hadn't done that, they wouldn't have had the emergency meetings. They wouldn't have gotten close to 100% probably. So kind of keep doing what you're doing, but it's this constant tension this line that we really have to toe, I mean, on a monthly basis with issues with our district.
So, how much time?
We have 20 minutes, well, let's say 15 minutes total.
Total?
Total.
Oh, God.
Time
Well,
flies.
so I'm gonna ask one quick question on communication. So, do you have internal and external communication plans? And if you do, give us some gems of knowledge and insight on how to make them more effective.
Yeah,
It's
so
like for me, we're challenged by both of those.
yeah, so when I took over the organization, one thing that we thought we did really well, and then we kind of pulled key members in the community and found out we were terrible at, was this idea of communication. Right? So 2 years ago, we love our newsletter, think it's the greatest thing ever, you know, but yet everyone on staff is like, this is really just a grass tops communication vehicle. Like, this really isn't really pushing our agenda forward if we're trying to build the capacity of community members, right? And so we ended up finally creating an internal communication strategy that really kind of talked about the timing, you know, kind of coordinated the release of our reports, the timing of our campaigns, our parent workshops, and the messaging that finally like professionalized our work in communications, so that we were legitimately, you know, decent, you know, in that work. I still don't think we're very good. You know, we're launching a campaign to fix our website. But that whole kind of internal process to get your external communications piece, I think, you know, very few things are more important than that work if you're going to be an effective advocacy organization. And I still don't think we're that effective. So I mean, we are kind of a work in progress. And you know, I you know, submit myself to those in the room who know a lot more about that and can answer that question with a lot more rigor.
Well, before we get to them, Pam.
So we do have we have a communications plan. We don't distinguish internal or external exactly, but we have so with what would be an external communications plan. The North Star for our organization, unlike yours, which is choice, is career and college readiness. What we have, you know, pinned ourselves around is career and college readiness. So we very much communicate around those issues on an annual basis in a way that parents and students themselves sort of know what they have to do when. And I do want to say one other kind of communication we do, just again to throw it in the hopper. We've been doing 2 different educational programs, which are our communications vehicle. One is something we called Ed Talks. We stole it from TED Talks, but it's 2 20-minute sharp, edgy conversations. Which Cassandra actually helps to run, who's in the back, every other month. But the audience, and this has been really important for us, is young professionals, because we're trying to get the 20 and 30-somethings of our community to stay in the community and not exit to suburban schools. So we're gearing, you know, a communications plan with kind of smart, innovative talk to young professionals. The other thing we do is something called Our City, Our Schools. And that is a bi-monthly conversation that's really based in very immediate information from a couple presenters, but then asking community members to grapple with that information. We're doing, the one we're doing this month is on black male achievement. The last one we did was on, you know, nutrition and achievement and that kind of thing. So we do one that's very specifically about community conversation, and another that's very specifically aimed at young professionals. And I'm actually very excited about the young professionals one. We're getting, you know, 50, 60, I think at one point we had like 75 in one of our conversations. And by the way, we have them in a bar.
Oh my God, we're doing that too.
Yeah, it's in a bar, it's a lot of
Oh, so
fun,
funny.
really smart conversation, and then it's also a social networking
Yeah.
opportunity for young people
That's so
who
fun.
care about our public schools.
And the last thing I would add on communications for us is that, you know, we've been dabbling with technology, and we created a Smart Choices Hartford.org website, which was a tool that was developed specifically for the work that we do around school choice that allowed. It was the only way we could figure out that parents could really simplify all of the information on schools in their work one-on-one, face-to-face with other parents. So you see the site and you assume it's like a site for kind of suburban folks to understand like all of the suburban schools and the inner city schools and what they can choose from. because those would be the folks who have internet in their homes mostly, right? But in reality, it was a site that was created really to kind of sit down with someone and walk them through all their school options, and it gets sorted by distance from their home, racial balance, school gain and school average based on test scores, state test scores. But I think there's a new site out called Inside Schools .org in New York City, which is a site we're looking at right now to try to see about creating. I think it's really powerful.
All right, so we got 10 minutes. We want to open it up. So what struggles, successes are in the room around convenings and communication? Rob?
This is a huge struggle for us because we have a hard time distinguishing between independent and neutral. And I see them as completely different. We're not neutral. I would argue you're not. If you're advocating on
We're not objective.
right. And so, but we're not. We don't represent the union, the district, the charter school movement, this, that, which makes us independent. So when we convene, there are those who say, well, you can't really be an honest broker unless you're neutral. And I struggle with that, because I don't think there's any way to be in this. First of all, if we're neutral, I'm out. because I'm not. So I could use your help around that issue.
I think for us, what we, in our strategic planning process that we just are finishing up right now, we tackled this head on and decided that we had to ditch this concept of neutrality and really focus on kind of our identity as a group, really created by the business community around an interest, which is Hartford students that are college and career ready, and who hopefully end up coming back and working in Hartford. So our whole messaging will change about why we do the work we do, and kind of we're going to live and die by it. But at the same time, we're going to focus on our independence so that the anti-corporate reformers can't really label us. We are lucky in the sense that in Hartford, unlike many other cities that you guys live in, the level of sophistication in the anti-reform debate is very low. It's getting higher, which is a huge worry for us. But it's so low that people know who's on our board. I mean, it's on our website. Yet no one is going through kind of like you guys are the corporate ed reform monsters. I think where you guys are, it's a different situation. But I think for us, it's ditching this whole kind of neutrality, but really focusing on the independence and kind of living and dying by it, and trying to put it out there as much as possible. So I've even started in my presentations to whether it's funders or community groups in the last month, just testing out new messaging about kind of what our interest is and how we are not just this kind of neutral watchdog. But we are now ever mindful of making sure that in our e-newsletter, which is where everyone is looking at our voice every week, that we are not becoming the cheerleaders more so than folks want us to. We are not becoming overly critical either. We have to toe that line in every single story we write so that those who are reading it know that they can't just kind of like pick us off and drop us in the box.
I would, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to take another question.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would also say it's independence, not neutrality, and I think our obligation is to the young people. If we keep the youth in our eyesight and what they need, and that's where our loyalty lies, that's really how we decide what we're going to be. Now, people answer that question differently, I know, but that would be my response back.
So I have a question about kind of social media being current and who conveys the messages, right? So in trying to be, really kind of a collaborative and community grassroots kind of focus and trying to promote distributed leadership, how do you we don't understand it enough to figure out where the concerns are about what people might be tweeting or might be saying, yet we want to be able to create as much voice and opportunity. So how do you manage all of that?
So my communications director leads the social media, and if nobody else is doing it, she does it, and she does our own stuff. She retweets tweeting as a shorthand here. She does the districts. She does other interesting nonprofits. She watches everybody else and an interesting report comes out and she does it. And she is trying desperately to train all of us to be participants in it. So now she's got about 4 or 5 staff people who actually watch their particular niche in the world and either do it or feed it to her. But she's had the lion's share of doing it.
And so do you then have like protocols about the things that are acceptable for people to tweet about, or,
We
I mean, I
don't.
just,
Yeah, we thought that, we struggled so mightily on this because we are a very conservative organization, as it turns out. And I think, you know, we got a board of risk managers, right? So, and it's like the insurance capital of the world. These folks are not trying to like take on the world. But I think, you know, we finally landed and just said, you know, we don't know enough, we're not sophisticated enough to really kind of come at this with like a fully baked plan. So let's just kind of wing it. And what we made a point to do, though, was to model in our communications the respectful kind of debate that we would want to see. So when there is an anti-reform, I hate using that, but you know, you guys kind of know what I mean. It's a shorthand for, you know, someone that's not on our page. You know, we let it go. We respond to it. If we you know, always kind of have another voice, but we do it in a way that kind of pushes more folks to at least talk about it. And when we tweet, we purposely tweet things that are positive going on in the unions. You know, and that hasn't really gotten us much of anything yet. But we're really trying to kind of have a base philosophy on it. We can just model the kind of dialogue we want that would say, just talk about these issues. I don't really care where you stand. That'd be great. Eventually, we're going to hit this kind of like, there's going to be profanity. There's going to be some kind of like really impassioned argument that we're going to have to develop protocols for, but not yet.
Anything else?
Oh, yeah. I just had a question about convening and how do you, I guess I'm wondering about how do you keep momentum going, but not just momentum in terms of bringing people together to listen and hear from ideas or learn about information, but if you have any convenings where you have people come together to listen, hear from each other, but also act and be consistently engaging with each other and acting. I think one of the things that we've had trouble with is convening collaboratives of organizations where there are specific kind of set of expectations around actions, but then people come to the table assuming that everything will be done for them and you're telling them what to do rather than engaging themselves. So I just wonder, you know, if you've had that happen in terms of communicating and, communication, how does that play?
Well, so my wife and I are celebrating our 27th year of marriage. And part of why we were able to get through 27 years together is we both believe their relationships are more like videotapes than snapshots. Because there were definitely times, you know, that a snapshot was taken. If you kind of knew that, or thought that something else wasn't going to come, it would have been over, right? And I like convening is like a videotape to me, right? So I'll tell you a quick story. We're trying to get shared space. So there's 7,000 empty chairs in HISD middle schools. The legislature's in session, and everybody's running up trying to give charter schools capital financing so that they can build their own schools, which, like, to my board and myself, is just insane, right? Why would we build schools when we've got 7,000 seats? Give the charters the seats in the schools. So we get this convening, and we got the guy that used to be head of Continental Airlines, Larry Kellner, who really knows Terry Greer well, and they're buddies. So we got Kellner coming over for this convening lunch, and we've prepared this beautiful paper, and everything's ready to go. The Arnold Foundation is on board, A+ is there. this is gonna be awesome. Well, so Larry calls the day before the lunch and says, I can't come, I've been called to Austin. Well, so that next day, I'm watching the Senate Ed Committee. He's sitting in there and he's sitting with his wife. And I was like, yeah, I know who called you to Austin. You know, your wife did, right? You know, you blew off this lunch, this important lunch, right? But, like, really, what really happened is Larry's not ready to have that lunch. He's still trying to figure out what he's going to say to Terry, right? So we just basically said, okay, we're not going to have lunch today.
Kick the can.
That's right. But that lunch is coming, right? And I know it's coming because my board wants that lunch to happen. Because not all of my board, but a lot of my board are business people. And when you sit down with business people and say, hey, Ron, there's 7,000 chairs empty, but we want to build new schools down the road. What? Crazy, right? So I think like relationship building is a lot like, you know, a marriage, and you just have to keep at the convenience, right? And like to us, there's always a strategy to the convening, right? Very rarely do we ever just do one convening and that's it. So we will like make well, I just said it, a strategy around the convenings, you know, in terms of getting people off their mark.
And the videotape analogy is really interesting, right? Because last year we had a videotape where we had 5 convenings, and that was our videotape of kind of keeping people kind of engaged. And we were like, God, that was a terrible videotape. You know, and because we were like, well, that's great, but, you know, we weren't minding the capacity building that was necessary, the kind of relationships and engagement they wanted to have with us and with each other. It was just like, hey, look, attendance keeps going up at these events. You know, that's great. And so, you know, we call something now internally the afterlife, which is that we're not allowed to hold any event without there being a super well scripted and strategically thought out afterlife. And it has to kind of tie into everything that we're doing that year in terms of our goals for capacity building with all 5 stakeholder groups we target. And let me tell you, like, a lot less has gotten done. This is like a culture shock for the organization to kind of stop focusing on just the number of engagements and touches, which is more of a performance metric than an impact metric.
But you're probably doing more important work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would just add one other thing, because I think shared leadership is really critical in convening, and I'll tell you, this Career Readiness Collaborative that we convene, there are 3 principal groups who do it. It's shared power and shared leadership, and it has set an example for the entire consortium of people then to get together, because these 3 groups are operating kind of at a high level with one another. So I think the less the leadership even in the convening is one organization, and more that it's distributed, the more likely the whole collaborative works better.
Yeah.
So we grapple with convenings and all this stuff, and I think what you were just saying, Pam, about bringing multiple people together to kind of convene, because what we see, I think we talked earlier about kind of planning fatigue and organizing fatigue in communities. There's fatigue around going to meetings. Oh my God. And so, you know, if you think about all the PDs that take place at schools, and then it's like, you know, every subgroup has a convening around, you know, whether it's going to be around, you know, boys of color, or whether it's going to be about health clinics, or whether, right? There's only so many meetings that the same kind of all of us can go to. So what ideas are you grappling with, or what strategies are you grappling with to help consolidate some of these conversations, but not lose these important issues that, you know, you guys are lifting up in your surveys? How are we struggling with reducing or using modern technology to have real relationships without necessarily? So I just kind of opened that up.
I have a staff person, she's head of our community engagement team, who conducts, I would say, more than 50% of her meetings on the phone. I've just marveled at watching her do her work. So she doesn't run all over town in a set of meetings. And so that's an efficiency. The other thing is exactly what Paul said, was literally a clear agenda, an action outcome, and accountability. I mean, partly I know that we're in multiple meetings because of multiple issues, but we're also in multiple meetings because they don't add up to anything. And then we meet and meet and meet. So I have learned from her that the tightness of the organization of the gathering and the actual setting of expectations and then follow up by phone. I mean, it sounds so simple, but I'm not kidding you. She is the most efficient person I've ever worked with.
The only insight I can add to that is that we have decided, having sit on a number of coalitions, the ones that we didn't kind of bring together, and seeing how much doesn't happen, and how oftentimes it's the same people in the room on multiple coalitions. So we're just kind of like wasting each other's time, just more of it. One of the missing pieces, and Strive kind of helped us figure this out in Hartford, was that there was, in certain coalitions, those that had committed resources and having someone kind of like own the process, right? Own the kind of facilitation and the convening, things were moving. And those that were loosely formed kind of convenings, where everyone felt somewhat of an equal stake and yet no one felt full ownership, things were stagnant. And so we've put into our budget for next year, as a result of some of our strategic planning work, that this will be the goal that we will see ourselves playing in much of the community. So that if you invite us to a convening, like, shit's going to happen. You know? If not, like, forget about it.
I have one word answer to that. Webinars. I am turning into Max Headroom. I'm just Mr. Virtual. Me and Bob Wise, right? Putting out webinars. No, honestly, like we got a middle school network that's like Houston wide. So we got a school like 60 miles from the office. We got in one direction. We got schools 40 miles in the other direction, and all of our coaching is going online. They're starting to sort of use some of the flippant technology where they're going to teach what they want to see in the classroom to the teachers online, and then they're going to come in and assess, so how well are you doing it, right? So the face-to-face is more assessment and feedback than the actual teaching. All right, I think we're up on time.
All right.
Pass